Good morning. My name is Dr. Jody Rummer. I'm an associate professor of marine biology at the College of Science and Engineering at James Cook University, which is based in Townsville, Australia. We're perfectly placed right in the middle of the Great Barrier Reef, which is 2,300 kilometers of continuous coral reef ecosystems. I've been at James Cook University since 2011, but originally I came from North America. I grew up surrounded by cornfields, nowhere near the oceans, but watching documentaries with National Geographic and the BBC while I was growing up and fell in love with the ocean. So it really has been my dream to work here on the Great Barrier Reef and to study coral reef fishes as a career. Welcome to my Study Australia Masterclass. Now, of all of the underwater life, I get a lot of questions. Why fish? Why would you study fish? Well, fish make up over 50% of all vertebrates on the planet today. So over half of all animals that have a backbone are fish. There are over 31,000 named fish species, and they occupy every body of water on the planet. Because they occupy every body of water on the planet, they're also succumbing to the quality and conditions of that water as well. And therefore, they have a tremendous capacity for adaptation. They can cope with an array of conditions. And they've been doing that for over 400 million years. So I think that this capacity for coping with an array of conditions make them a really amazing group of organisms to study. Now, a lot of my research has been focusing on their capacity for breathing, taking up oxygen into their body and transporting it throughout their body. And we think that this has been the key to their success over 400 million years of evolution. Now, the question is, are they going to continue to adapt at this amazing rate to cope with the changes that they're facing in their environment today due to climate change? So I began my studies with my passion for the underwater world and the oceans to study marine biology. But I've also had a passion for physiology throughout my career as well. As an athlete all my life, I really am passionate about how the body works. And so I've been able to combine my love for athletic activity and sport and physiology with my love of the ocean to develop a really amazing career for myself here at JCU. Now, we might think of physiology as a really complicated science, but really it's just understanding the inner workings of the body. So whether it be the human body or a fish, we could use physiology to understand the cardiac system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, how the bones and muscles work. Physiology is a really amazing field of work. Now, combine that with how fish, for example, are functioning in their environment, and we can think of them as miniature athletes. And that's how I like to approach the research that I do, my underwater aquatic athletes, so to speak. Now, how do we test aquatic athletes? We think of ourselves as athletes, and we might be running on a treadmill, for example, measuring how many calories we're burning, how much oxygen we're breathing. Well, we do the same with fish as well. And that's really how my research has expanded over my career here at James Cook University. I use a lot of these similar traits that we investigate in human athletes. Maybe some of you might have a smartwatch tracking your heart rate. We do some of the same things with fish and sharks on the Great Barrier Reef and in coral reefs worldwide. Now, athletic performance in the fishes can tell us a lot about how they're coping with conditions in their environment, conditions that they might feel as stressful, such as warming oceans, ocean acidification, decreases in the ocean's oxygen levels, other conditions that are human-related, associated with climate change and pollution. Fishes are in it for their life. If they don't perform athletically, that means the end of a species in some cases. So the stakes are a lot higher for the fishes if they can't perform athletically in their environment. But let's come back to the Great Barrier Reef. Probably the most unsuspecting tiny athletes are the larval coral reef fishes. So a coral reef fish, right when it hatches from an egg, is probably the best athlete in the ocean. How do we test athletic performance in these tiny little athletes? So going back to our human athletes, we might be pushing a human athlete on a treadmill or on a stationary bicycle, or timing how fast they're swimming in a lapped pool. Well, we have to build a bit of an aquatic treadmill to test fish athletes. We can challenge them by increasing the current flow in these aquatic treadmills and monitoring an array of traits, such as how much oxygen they're breathing, how much energy it costs them to swim at various speeds, what their maximum swimming speed is, what their most efficient swimming speed is, how long it takes them to fatigue, and how long it takes them to recover. So we can get a lot of information from these aquatic treadmills that we use to push our aquatic athletes. Not only that, but we can take blood samples just like we do with human athletes and monitor how efficiently their blood is transporting oxygen throughout their body. And that's been a real passion project of mine, investigating oxygen transport or true athletic performance in these fishes. If they can transport oxygen throughout their body really effectively, they can be elite athletes. And that really is the secret to their success. In some of my research, I've been able to determine that fishes are able to transport oxygen up to 50 times better than humans. And they do this because they have a special protein in their body. It's not unlike ours, called hemoglobin. It's just a little bit different, and it allows them to transport oxygen so much more effectively than we are able to. So that might actually be the secret to their success. Now, in these blood samples, not only can we understand how effectively they're transporting oxygen throughout their body and delivering it to those key athletic muscles, like their swimming muscles and fins, but we can also see how fast their body is recovering from these athletic challenges and how long it takes them to recover as well from these blood samples. Now, one of the biggest problems I've been addressing with my research so far, and one of the biggest problems these amazing aquatic athletes have been facing in the oceans, is the problem of global climate change. Atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased since about the 1990s by about 1%. Since about the 2000s, it's increased by about 3%. So we know that the trajectory is getting really steep in terms of these emissions. Now, this has resulted in the concentrations increasing from about 280 to over 400 parts per million in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. So this is very much linked to industrial technology. And the oceans are absorbing about a third of this excess carbon dioxide. This is decreasing the ocean's pH, which has happened already by about 0.1 units. Now, that might not seem like a whole lot, but the pH scale is logarithmic, so that can be anywhere from 20 to 28% increase in the acidity of the oceans since this time. Now, a decrease in the ocean's pH is problematic for any organism that needs to build a shell. That chemistry prevents the organism from being able to build the shell. When I was young, I did an experiment in school where when we were losing our baby teeth, we put one of our baby teeth into a cup of vinegar. And vinegar is an acid. And what we saw over time is that it started dissolving the tooth. Now, that's a very similar situation to what would happen with any shell-building or bone-building organism in the ocean having to cope with a decrease in pH. Now, in addition to ocean acidification, the oceans are absorbing a lot of that excess heat that's going into the atmosphere due to these greenhouse gases. And that's increasing the ocean sea surface temperatures by anywhere from a degree to nearly 5 degrees by the end of the 21st century. Now, this is alarming because warmer waters are creating a lot of issues for a lot of different organisms. And that's another big topic that I've been investigating with my research. How are these aquatic athletes coping with a decrease in the ocean's pH and an increase in the ocean's temperature at the same time? It is proposed that we are now living in a geological epoch known as the Anthropocene, which is defined by human impacts on the planet's biodiversity and geology through climate change, species extinctions, coastal erosion, and other pollution sources. Now, it is my goal to investigate how climate change is affecting coral reef fishes and the ecosystems that they support, in order to find management solutions, policy solutions, and conservation outcomes to make a good Anthropocene. So, of the 31,000 or so named fishes on the planet today, maybe about 1,600 of those live here on the Great Barrier Reef. About 1,400 or so are actually coral reef fishes. And I also do a lot of work on the cartilaginous fishes, so the sharks and the rays, which here on the Great Barrier Reef, we have quite a few of those. Worldwide, there are nearly 1,200 species. So we're quite lucky to be able to investigate some of these sharks and rays here on the Great Barrier Reef as well. One of my favorite species to investigate is probably the most unsuspecting tough shark of the Great Barrier Reef. Now, when I say tough shark, you might think, oh, this is going to be a really big species, really ferocious shark species. Actually, it's probably one of the smaller shark species you might find within the crevices of the coral reef, and it's the epaulet shark. The epaulet shark is often known as a carpet shark. It's a small, benthic, or bottom-dwelling shark species, maybe only grows to about 1 meter long, and it's not the bitiest of shark species. In fact, it's more wiggly and snake-like than other shark species. My team has been studying the epaulet shark since about 2011. And in fact, the epaulet shark is really the shark species that got our PhysioShark, or our Physiology of Shark research program, going in the first place. It's a small shark species that's endemic to the Great Barrier Reef, meaning it is only found here on the Great Barrier Reef. It's a benthic species, meaning it lives largely on the bottom, crawls around within the reef matrix, in the shallows. It's small, maybe exceeding not even 1 meter in size, and it's also really easy to keep in captivity. Also, as an egg-laying species, we can rear these eggs in the laboratory under various climate change scenarios to simulate ocean acidification or ocean warming, scenarios that would be mid-century or even end of century with these climate change conditions. This species thrives in captivity. In fact, some of the early studies on the epaulet shark have demonstrated that this species is the most anoxia and hypoxia tolerant shark species on the planet. That means that this species can survive virtually without oxygen for a couple hours. Now, that's a condition that would kill us in moments as humans. So the species is quite tough. And we think that because this species is quite tough, that it might be also robust to these climate change conditions as well. So under mid or end of century ocean acidification and ocean warming conditions, we can investigate this shark species, not only from the embryonic stages while they're developing in the eggs, but also through hatch on up into adulthood. Some of our early studies on adult epaulet sharks indeed have shown us that under ocean acidification conditions, we see no effect on metabolic physiology, energy use, oxygen uptake rates, performance traits, even behaviors that are really important for the shark species, such as sheltering or hiding, and even finding food. None of these traits are affected by these ocean acidification conditions. We did a little bit of a rewind and started looking at the early life stages as well, these epaulet sharks while they're developing in the egg, and sure enough, they are fine under these ocean acidification conditions. Does that mean good news for the shark species? Well, it turns out that temperature might be their kryptonite. So we started investigating the effects of elevated temperatures or ocean warming conditions on the shark species as well. And one of the first studies that came out of that intention was on eggs that were developing under warming conditions. Now, under end of century conditions, when an embryo is developing in its egg and it hatches, all of its coloration patterns are off. It almost looks as if a watercolor painting got splashed with water. So smudges and incomplete patterning. We thought, what's going on here? Is this going to be a really big problem for this particular shark species? If this particular shark species is known for having these big round spots on the sides of its body, what do those spots look like to a predator? Big eyes, perhaps? Who are the predators of the epaulet sharks? Usually larger sharks. So if these spots are disrupted, could that mean that they don't look scary to a predator? Other predators to the epaulet shark are in the air, so large sea eagles. And if those large sea eagles see these big spots, they might think these big spots are either the eyes of a larger organism or even the spiracles of a big stingray. And so thinking, that's too big for me to eat. So if color patterning is a deterrent to predators and that's disrupted under ocean warming conditions, that could be a really big problem for the shark species. We've done a lot more research on ocean warming in the epaulet shark, and it turns out that it is a big problem for the shark species. Under ocean warming conditions, these eggs are developing much faster, and the embryos are hatching smaller and with much higher metabolic costs than they would under current day conditions. Usually, these embryos are hatching and they've got a good couple weeks to survive on that remaining yolk that they had in their egg after they hatch, before they have to learn how to be a shark and hunt and find food on their own. Under ocean warming conditions, they need food right away, so they're hatching hungry as well. Now, this could be a really big problem when we think of ecosystem balance. We've even started to rewind back to the adults and understand how the adults are coping with ocean warming. How is that affecting reproduction in the adults and the timing of reproduction? And we're even using other human technology to assess their performance under these ocean warming conditions, such as ultrasound, which is what a human female would be using in the doctor's office to see how many babies she has. But we also see how many eggs a female epaulet shark is about to lay under these different conditions in the laboratory. So a lot of these same technologies now we're using to investigate epaulet sharks under these ocean warming conditions to really understand how warm water will affect this very important species to the Great Barrier Reef. Now, our work here on the epaulet shark at James Cook University is on only one species of the nearly 1,200 shark and ray species on the planet today and 31,000 species of fish on the planet today in total. We're lacking data on over 40% of all shark and ray species, so we really need a lot more research to understand how these valuable species are coping with these stressors in their environment, such as those related to climate change. So our work here on the epaulet shark and the other species of coral reef fishes that we're investigating is really important, not only for today and advancing our knowledge on these critical species that are so important to these marine ecosystems, but also for conservation and management into the future. So I've been leading this team of amazing students here at James Cook University since 2011, and it really is a team effort. It's not on any one of us to solve the world's problems and to help with conservation, not only here on the Great Barrier Reef, but in ocean ecosystems worldwide. It's really important to bridge education, outreach, and communication to make this happen. Here at James Cook University, we have amazing researchers, professors, lecturers, and students like yourselves that are engaging and doing the research and learning the science to help with this effort. We have incredible resources not only available here at James Cook University on campus, but also with our field stations and the marine resources and natural ecosystems that are right literally on our doorstep. And that concludes our Study Australia Masterclass. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Jody Rummer. I'm an associate professor of marine biology in the College of Science and Engineering here at James Cook University.